Well, Watches and Wonders has been and gone. When the show was on, I promised I would sort of wait and let my thoughts ferment a little bit before I got them out there. Well, that time has been. I've got my thoughts. They've been nicely bubbling away. See me after the intro and we'll get into my favorites, the watches I think were successful, whether I liked them or not, and a couple of watches that just didn't quite hit the mark. Hi, I'm Pete McConville. Welcome to my channel where I overthink, overanalyze, and just geek out on watches far more than is appropriate for a grown man. What I'm going to talk about today are my favorite watches from Watches and Wonders, the watches, whether I liked them or not, were, I think, successful in the main, and those watches which, for whatever reason, didn't quite hit the mark. We'll start with my favorites, and I'm going to try and skip through these pretty quickly. If you want details, go find it somewhere else. So my favorite, I'm going to lead with a watch I am definitely going to buy. And you may as well start rolling your eyes now. I'm thinking the Alpina Extreme Integrated Bracelet. Yeah, I know, the world does not need another blue-dialed integrated bracelet stainless steel sports watch. As soon as this was announced, I groaned inwardly and I wished that Alpina was better than that and didn't bring this watch out. I'm going to do a whole video on my journey with this watch, but in short, they just did it really well. I kept coming back to it thinking, yeah, look, it's a well-trod path, but Alpina have just nailed it. And I'm an Alpina guy and I don't have a watch like this. And oh, bugger it, take my money. I'm going to buy it. It's one of my favorite watches. Okay, so number two, a watch I can't afford, but I wish I could because it's just a little bit too expensive. I'm going to have to look down to say this, and it's the Trilobe Un Fol Jaune Dune Titanium. Now, this is sort of a development of an existing Dune series watch that Trilobe make, but what they've done is sort of stacked, instead of having the movement in concentric rings all under the dial, what they've done now is explode the dial, suck the movement up into a hemispherical dome, and then cover the whole thing with a huge bubbly sapphire crystal. And it's just amazing, and I love it. Is it as good as something like an MB&F? No, it is not. Is it 1/10 the price of an MB&F? Yes, it is. And there's a part of that that really appeals to me. I think if you talk about boxes, for example, the best boxes are almost never heavyweights, because at the heavyweight end, you can cover a lot of flaws by just getting bigger. But if you're a middleweight, you've got to deal with those constraints. You've got to be faster and cleverer, and you've got to be a bit, you've got to have more going on upstairs. And that's where these accessible indies, these companies like Trilobe, prices in the 10,000 to 20,000, this is 27, but bear with me, that 10 to 20,000 Swiss francs, that's why they're my favorite, because they're really doing amazing things with really tight budgets, without just being able to stack on more weight like an FP Journe or a Groenfeld can do. And yeah, I just love what they do, and I think Trilobe have just nailed this one, hit it out of the park. It is a fraction too expensive for me, but I love it, and it's one of my faves anyway. Sticking with my faves that I'll never be able to afford, but you know what, bugger it, it's going to be here. The Patek Calatrava 24-hour travel time. For me, Pateks always feel a bit old, a bit elderly, a bit musty, a bit old man gentleman's club. And I don't mean spearmint rhino style gentleman's club. I mean old musty men's only, we all fall asleep after our soup at lunchtime kind of gentleman's club. Yeah, Pateks are just a bit stodgy, I guess. But here, it's not a young man's watch. It's not playful. It's not whimsical, but it's just young enough, just casual enough, just playful's the wrong word, but this is a watch worn by people that just undo their tie a little bit and maybe take their cufflinks off and roll their sleeves up just a fraction. Let's not get crazy. But I love that about it. It's just the way it's presented, the way it's made, and what it's doing. It's just a watch that I love. I'm never going to have the $70,000 or $80,000 I need to buy it. Wish I did. One of my favorites of the show. Okay, so next we've got the Hermes 08. You can take your pick, whether it's the monopusher chronograph with carbon fiber case or the three-hander in fiberglass. Don't know, don't care. Love them both. Love this watch. It's so artful. The design is so amazing. It's so different and yet familiar. This is a fantastic example of why I can't wait for companies like Hermes and Louis Vuitton and Chanel to get more and more involved in watches, because they really know what they're doing when it comes to this amalgam of art, craft and design in a way which so many watch companies have kind of forgotten. So Hermes, love this watch. Think I'm going to buy one at some point. And my final personal favorite winner of the Watches and Wonders is the Tag Heuer Carrera glass box. For so long, Tag Heuer is like a company with two halves that are, if not in conflict, are in permanent competition with each other. They're constantly sort of working against each other in whatever watch they're working with. Sometimes they're great when one of the half of the company vanishes and you get nothing but pure Tag, like the Aqua Racer, or nothing but pure Heuer in some of the old sort of Carrera or Monza sort of throwbacks. But here in the Carrera glass box, you get something really rare, which is Tag and Heuer collaborating, bringing the best of the old world comfortable slipper Carreras and the newer, more exciting, more novel Tags, working together and producing something better than either of the companies would, or either of those aspects of the company would on its own. Great movement, great case, great dial, fantastic sort of bezel and domed crystal treatment. Love this watch. I'm not going to pretend I'm going to buy it. I probably won't ever, but geez, I'd love to. Oh, and whether you take the blue with the 6 o'clock date or the black with the 12 o'clock date, I don't care. If I had the money, I'd buy them both. Okay, so now we'll get into the most successful watches, whether I like them or not. Two of them I'll knock over really quickly because I've already mentioned them. I think the Hermes H08 and the Tag Heuer Carrera glass box were crowd favorites. Everyone kind of liked them. They're on a lot of people's bests list. Okay, so parking those two. What else was big? Okay, so in general, I would say JLC had a fairly quiet show. A lot of people were getting a little tired of just seeing reverso after reverso. And spoiler, little warning in that for Tudor in a few years, I think. But we're not there yet. But despite the fact that there was a little bit of ennui, I think, when it came to talking about the JLCs, this watch, the Reverso Tribute Chronograph, nailed it. This was brilliant. This was amazing. Classic Reverso dial on one side, flip it over, and a really exciting, really novel, beautifully executed, just for this case shape, skeletonized chronograph movement. Chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. Cut through the miasma of all those other reversos. Regardless of what else happened with JLC, this watch was a winner. Okay, can you imagine an ice cream store that sold 64 flavors of ice cream, but when you got there, every flavor was a variation of vanilla? Well, congratulations, you've just gone to the Tudor ice cream shop. That is what they do. And you know what? I hate it. I think it is so dull, so boring, so derivative. But you know what? It doesn't matter what I think. They are selling up a storm, and a lot of people love what Tudor is doing. And so when Tudor brought out another flavor of vanilla ice cream, but in a slightly smaller 37 millimeter cone, the world lost its tits and everyone went crazy. I don't know why, but it'd be just dumb. I'd be like just having to ignore reality to pretend that the Tudor 54, Black Bay Tudor 54, whatever, wasn't a massive hit. And next, I'm going to say almost all the Rolexes. Whether you talk about the Rolex Titanium Yachtmaster, whether it was the gold GMT Masters, whether it was the, what was the other one? Oh, the 1908. All of those watches, big hits. Everyone loved them. I've heard hardly a crossword on any of those watches. They were a nice combination of giving the people what they wanted, whilst at the same time stretching the brand a little, but in a comfortable way that people didn't feel threatened by. Those three watches just nailed it. Big hits. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the watches that for whatever reason just didn't quite get there. So, okay, we've just talked about the Rolexes that made it. Let's talk about the Rolexes that just didn't quite, for whatever reason, they haven't quite hit the mark. The first was the Explorer in 40 millimeters. I think a lot of people are they're really feeling uncomfortable with the idea that Rolex is, I'm going to say, showing a weakness in that, keeping your customers happy and giving them what they want is kind of, it's a horrible thing to say. But for Rolex, that is perceived as weakness. Clearly, non-watch enthusiasts haven't heard that we're only supposed to like boy-sized watches like 36 millimeters. Rolex apparently still has customers that want man-sized watches. They want the 40 millimeter Explorer. Rolex has given it to them. And amongst the enthusiasts, that's not landed well. I think the other two watches are the Celebration watch or the Bubble watch, the balloons on the OP, and the Live, Pray, Love emoji jigsaw day date. Those watches are stretching Rolex into new crowds, into the Byron babes, into the sort of footballers' wives crowd that might have otherwise bought the Candy Floss Richard Milles. And a lot of the Rolex bros don't like what they see. Next, I'm going to say the Ingenieur. Now, people generally love the Ingenieur. And I'm not saying anything original here. I think I've seen about 4 videos today that have said basically the same thing. And that is that the Ingenieur, great design, appears to be really well made, feels great on the wrist, wears beautifully, probably needs a little bit of work on the clasp, I understand, but I also hear that's happening. But besides all that, just the price. People were not ready for, I'm going to use Australian prices here, $17,000 to $20,000 Ingenieurs. Now, I don't know whether that's too much, not enough, whatever. I'm not going to argue the case. What I am going to say is that price acting as a bit of a brake on the enthusiasm. And that watch, as a result, hasn't quite achieved what I suspect IWC wanted it to. Now, I'm going to finish up with Cartier. Now, Cartier had a lot of great stuff and individual pieces were kind of nice. And I'm sure there's going to be some people who pick individual Cartier watches and go, this was a winner. What are you talking about? But what I feel is that Cartier, as they do, gave so many new references. I think there was something like 40 or 50 new references at this show. In that massive fog of new watches, something has to be amazing to cut through and be worth writing about specifically and elevating. Last year, they managed to do that with a couple of their incredible pieces. But this year, not so much. This year, I don't think any particular Cartier was so great that it managed to separate itself out from the pack. And as a result, they all kind of got dragged back in and treated as a bit of a homogeneous glob. Okay, so, and my last loser of the show. And I don't like picking a watch company out as a loser. And what I'm about to say does not mean that their watches are trash. They could be very good, but I just don't know. And that is Baume & Mercier. They released a bunch of new watches and they got precisely no coverage. They sank like a stone. They just went into the mud and all we heard was as they went bloop into it. No coverage, no stories, nothing. They may as well have saved their money and not turned up. Now, maybe they're huge in Asia. Maybe they're getting coverage elsewhere. I don't know. But given the number of things they showed, given the effort they put into these, and given that there was simply no response, I can only have Baume and Mercier down as my absolute abject losers of this show. Okay, so that's it. Now, I should say there's a whole bunch of other watches and companies that did things I liked. I quite liked a lot of the Grand Seikos, quite liked some of the Chopars. You know, there was the Zeniths were pretty cool. That you weren't on this list doesn't mean you were terrible. It just means that you didn't really cut through this year for me. How about you? Do you agree with my list? Are there watches that you think, can you just not get past me having the Alpina? Did you stop then and there? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I've been Pete McGonville. This is what I do. If you like it, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. And we'll see each other later. Bye.